Lizzie Anna Burwell was like many other white girls growing up in slaveholding households in the Linsville, North Carolina area in 1847. She loved flowers and often strolled through her parents' garden with Fanny, the enslaved woman charged with her care. After spending so much time with Fanny, Lizzie Anna developed an intense bond with her. But one day, Lizzie Anna became vexed with Fanny, so she went to her father and demanded that he cut Fanny's ears off and get her, Lizzie Anna, a new maid from Clarksville. Lizzie Anna was 3 years old. Although young children commonly express displeasure in extravagant and even violent language, the terms they use reflect their environment, and Lizzie Anna's complaint tells us something crucial about hers. During those walks through the garden, and perhaps while observing her parents interact with the enslaved people around them, Lizzie Anna was observing how to be a slave owner. She was coming to understand the obscene logic that made it perfectly acceptable to enjoy the company of her enslaved caretaker in one moment and threaten to mutilate her or buy another slave to take her place the next. In the colonial period, primogeniture, the practice of leaving all the family property to the other son, helped parents determine the size and nature of each child's inheritance or whether a child would inherit at all. During and after the Revolution, however, Americans looked upon primogeniture unfavorably, not only because it disadvantaged many young men and women, but because it was the means by which British aristocrats secured their power and ensured that it remained within their ancestral lines. By the end of the century, the historian C. Ray Keim observed, equal portions for all children was generally the rule of inheritance. But even before the abolition of primogeniture in these states, individuals could circumvent it by writing their wills in ways that would allow them to bequeath their property however they chose. Frequently, parents were more inclined to give their daughters slaves than land, and they often gave them in the expectation that their daughters would take charge of them. Enslaved people often knew that they would be given to their owner's daughters well before the transfer of ownership took place. Balkis White recalled that his owners always said that he was to belong to Miss Cathy. Agnes James's master chose her as a gift for his daughter, Janie Little, because as James remembered, he gives all his daughters one of us to have a care for them. Just as enslaved people came to anticipate the transition from one owner to the next, young white girls did too. Ownership and control went hand in hand. And for white girls who had slaves, developing techniques of management and discipline was an important aspect of their early training. For those who were newly inducted into slave-owning communities, the plantation was a school where they learned how to be propertied women. According to historian Joan Cashin, young white men learned the fundamental lessons in exercising power from older white men. But white girls learned those lessons too. Slave-owning parents allowed their daughters to assume the roles of instructor and disciplinarian early on. White parents also taught their daughters the basic principles of slave ownership through naming practices and by requiring enslaved people to use salutations that conferred respect when addressing them and their children. Slave-owning girls also made it clear they had the power to claim other human beings as their property when they selected specific enslaved children to serve them. When Betty Coffer was born, her master's daughter Ella was only a little girl, but she nevertheless claimed Coffer as her slave shortly after the child's birth. They played together and grew up together. Eventually, Coffer became Ella's personal servant, waiting on her, standing behind her chair during meal times, and sleeping beside her on the bedroom floor.